of this panel is Mr. Sarbah. Sarbah is an interdisciplinary scholar, thinker, and innovator. He's passionate about applying leadership, education, and social innovation to solving the most daunting social, economic, and environmental challenges. He obtained a Bachelor of Arts, first-class honors from the University of Ghana, a Master of Arts in Social Organizational Psychology from Columbia University in New York City, an advanced postgraduate certificate in Cooperation and Conflict Resolution from Columbia University, a Master of Philosophy in Innovation, Strategy, and Organization from the University of Cambridge, George Business School in England. He's currently a Master of Design Studies in Risk and Resilience at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design, where he's interested in design solutions and the role of social innovation in solving environmental, economic, and social challenges, particularly as it relates to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Mark has a wealth of experience in strategic advisory and research roles in a number of countries with some of the world's biggest organizations, such as T-Mobile Telecommunications, the Better Business Bureau of the United States, Tata Group of Companies, amongst others. He is the founder of EdAcme, an education startup targeted at reducing accessibility gaps to tertiary education. In his leisure time, Mark enjoys reading inspirational books, watching soccer, meeting people from different cultures, mentoring young people, and volunteering for social causes like this one. So with a warm round of applause, please welcome Mark Sarbah.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. Hi.
Just because you're here, give yourself a round of applause. I see some very familiar faces. My colleague right here, we went to University of Cambridge together. Thanks for coming from Stanford for support. Any Nigerians in the house? Ghanaians? We're not going to get into jollof rice. Instead, we want to be able to use the time to acknowledge everyone from Africa. Thanks for coming to this panel. I'm really excited to lead the conversation. How can a potentially rich country like Africa be so poor? How can a potentially rich continent like Africa be so poor? How can a potentially rich continent like Africa be so poor? Ladies and gentlemen, today, these panelists are going to help us understand how to use social entrepreneurship and innovation to change the narrative. Thanks for coming. My name is Sarbah. I'm very, very happy to lead the conversation. I'd like to introduce this illustrious panelist. Our first panelist is the founder and CEO of Operations Water, a social enterprise whose mission is to deliver clean water solutions to the greatest number of people in need at the lowest cost per person by developing sustainable infrastructure projects. Ryan is also a board member of Giving Ground, a nonprofit that funds community-based serving disadvantaged youth in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Phillips Page for you. Our second panelist is the Director of Fellowship and Student Programs for the Legadum Center for Development and Entrepreneurship at MIT. Prior to joining MIT in January of 2017, she managed UBS America's Elevating Entrepreneurship Initiative, a portfolio of philanthropic partnerships and programs focused on driving toward a more inclusive entrepreneurial landscape. This included Project Entrepreneur, a collaboration with Rent the Runway Foundation to increase the pipeline of women building economically impactful companies. Prior to UBS, she oversaw co-curricular and experiential learning activities for Wharton Entrepreneurship, including the annual business plan competition and global internship program. She also served as a member of the Venture Initiation Program Management, and led development of the department's Venture Development Program at the school's San Francisco campus. She holds a BA in Economics and Public Policy from Duke University and a Master of Science in Education from the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Megan Michelle. third panelist is an experienced private equity lawyer and currently serves as Vice President and Assistant General Counsel at JP Morgan, where she advises institutional investors. She has advised investment worth over $1 billion and has extensive experience in private and public investment arising out of frontier markets. Previously, she served as Vice President and Chief Compliance Officer at Kuramo Capital, an independent investment management firm focused on alternative assets in emerging markets. She received her BA from the University of Chicago, where she was a Jeff Metcalf Fellow, and her JD from Washington and Lee University School of Law. She's a member of the New York State and New York Jersey bars. She was an elected member of the board of University of Chicago Black Alumni Association and Vice President of the Association of Black Women Entrepreneurs. She's a founder of Impact Her, a nonprofit organization that helps break the financing gap for African women-owned businesses. Please welcome Efe Ukala. Our fourth panelist, who's running a little bit late, is an attorney by profession. She was trained and admitted to the bar in South Africa. She worked at Bauman's, which is one of Africa's largest law firms. During that period, she also served on the board of Chris Hani Foundation. She's currently a co-founder and vice president of Kuro Medical. Kuro Medical is a company incorporated in South Africa that delivers technology and human resource-based at-home medical care solutions for defined acute and post-acute conditions. She received a Bachelor of Laws from the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. She's currently pursuing a Master of Laws here at Harvard. Her name is Ziko Pali. All right. Illustrious panelists, first of all, it's a pleasure to be able to dialogue with you, to sort of delve into the nitty-gritty of the complexity of development on the African continent and how social entrepreneurship and innovation can be used sort of as a conduit to offset that. Now, I wanted to get into how did you become interested in social entrepreneurship? In 2 minutes, if you want to just let the audience and us know. So we'll take it from Ryan.
For myself, I've always had a saying about myself, I'd rather help 1 billion people than make $1 billion. So it's part of just what drives me is more impact. As long as basic needs are met and living the life you want to live, I'd rather be focused on solving problems, especially for people who aren't in a position to help themselves.
So, you might have, from my bio, what I fall in love with is supporting entrepreneurs, right? And so when I was working at Wharton, I absolutely realized that what I wanted to do with my life was create conditions that would help entrepreneurs succeed. And I saw some really amazing companies being built. But when I went to New York and did some corporate philanthropy work, I started to realize the impact was just as important. And so when I was working with these companies, they were building companies in Silicon Valley or in New York City, they were creating amazing things and maybe very valuable companies, but they were oftentimes just putting like a thin layer of efficiency into an already efficient system. So when the opportunity came to work with student entrepreneurs in emerging markets who were really tackling big, messy problems, but to see the opportunities, what the impact they were going to have and how they could, exponentially change people's lives, that really became an amazing way to combine this love of supporting entrepreneurs and creating conditions for them to help them with really seeing change happening in the world. So that's what's kind of got me to where I am today.
So for me, it was through my work on advising investors that were interested in Africa in how to structure those investments into African companies, right? And also looking at fund managers making investment into African companies. The more I did a lot of deals from Mozambique to Zimbabwe, to Nigeria, to Ghana, but something was consistent. Lots of men coming into the door, seeking private equity funding or other sorts of funding, but not enough women. Now, the women that came in were always, of course there were few, but it was always something wrong about why, we believed they weren't ready. And the question became, okay, is this an outlier? Is it just fun, or are others experiencing it? Speaking with other fund managers, it was pretty much consistent, and I started digging and figuring out, okay, is this a known problem? And I started seeing numbers from the IFC, which said there's a 300 billion funding gap for female entrepreneurs. The AFDB estimates that for Africa at 42 billion for the women. And I figured, why not become part of the solution, right? Rather than doing research. And so that was really why, Impact Her started, which focuses on one thing: training and teaching African women on how to build scalable businesses so as to get institutional funding if they want it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Ryan, let's start off with Operation Water, which your work falls within the broader scheme of the Sustainable Development Goals, which were pretty much signed into action in 2016. There's a school of thought that governments by themselves can't solve the 17 goals. How do you see social entrepreneurs playing a role in doing that, and sort of grounding that within the context of your work?
I think the governments kind of create the conditions to try to attract and entice social entrepreneurs to come and solve those problems. So I think there's a massive role for social entrepreneurs to play, and depending on which country is most plagued by certain problems, there's probably going to be more incentives to focus on those problems, and need to encourage the social entrepreneurs to come and get comfortable and learn and help solve those problems and work together.
Wonderful. Megan, so Clayton Christensen, Ifosa, and the other guy have just come up with a book, The Prosperity Paradox, in which they challenge the predominant ethos surrounding development from the aid approach. And they believe that innovation is the way to lift nations from the quagmire of poverty to the pinnacle of development. What are your thoughts on that? And if you can draw on your work at the Legadum Center and how that feeds into that, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely love it. Let's just start there. We operate as a center under the philosophy that while there will always be a need for traditional development, that is for discrete activities such as humanitarian crises, disaster relief. Those are kind of short-term stopgaps, not what's going to drive sustainable, scalable change. In the book they talk about different types of innovation, and I think it's really the market creating innovations that are what we drive our entrepreneurs to think about and work towards. Because this is, it doesn't have to be market innovations for the base of the pyramid, because if you create jobs for the emerging middle class, subsequent follow-on jobs are created, good jobs are created, and that drives prosperity. So we actually encourage a lot of our students won't call themselves social entrepreneurs, although they're driving for social impact and they're driving for economic impact. They say, I'm an entrepreneur, and that's going to make a difference, and that's what matters. Don't call me a social entrepreneur, call me an entrepreneur. But they care about what they're doing and who their customers are. So, the book at its core really resonates with the philosophy of the center. We have very few kind of nonprofit companies, or they may be hybrid companies, but they're really creating good jobs and really interesting conditions for the people, and whether it's their end users, their customers, or the people in their community.
Wonderful, wonderful. Effie, to come back to you, so you've accumulated substantial experience within the finance sector, and you sort of transitioned into using that knowledge to sort of impact women. The predominant belief is that venture capital, as is witnessed within the United States, as in Silicon Valley, is a rarity in Africa. Now, what are your thoughts on that? Where do you see venture capital, venture philanthropy, and all of those impact investing? These are all buzzwords that we're hearing. How do you see those impacting those being used as a solution to the financing problem?
Yeah, no, I think, that's a great question, because it touches upon, the different approaches that could be used to tackle this issue of funding in the African continent, right? When I look at the issue of funding, I sort of look at it from a three-pronged approach, right? The first prong, I would say, from a policy level, I think that African governments need to delve deeper into creating an atmosphere that encourages investment, in that local investment, not just important investment, right? So, African entrepreneurs shouldn't all go line up in Silicon Valley waiting to get funded, but also let's look within our own community, right? South Africa did something amazing, I think SARS Section 12, which allows their local investors to be able to, encouraging them rather to invest into fund managers or venture capitalists in South Africa, and in return, the encouragement here is the tax breaks you get as a result. So I think other African countries need to look at that approach. The second prompt to that is the entrepreneur themselves. You have to make sure you're creating market-based products, because of course you can go to the grantors, but at some point after they funded you for 5 years, you have to look for other sources, right? But if your product is market-based, you're also expanding the different possibilities to receive funding from. You're looking at venture capital, you're looking at PE, you're looking at grants. You're also ensuring that whatever you're producing, the market is responding to it appropriately so that you're getting the kind of returns you need, right? And the third is impact investing, right? So that prong, I look at it from an investment management approach. I think investment managers have to think critically as to how they're structuring their funds, right? Every investment manager wants to make at least 3x. You know, you talk to almost every African, oh yeah, I have to make 3x, right? Whereas they're really tracking at 1 point something these days. But to be able to get that return for them, you know, again, it has to be market-based. But the investors themselves need to now think about how do they structure their funds such that maybe a fund will be dedicated to impact investing, another fund will be dedicated to ensuring that there are companies that are run by women in there, so that we're now diversifying the approach and reaching, you know, these people. And when you have an impact investment fund, your approach there shouldn't be like the 3x now. It's more like, okay, let's look at what the market is. Let's be realistic about what kind of returns we can expect from, in quote, the social entrepreneurs, and adjust that, and also attract the right LPs that would be attracted to that kind of funding.
Wonderful. Can you guys hear us okay? Can you hear us? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay, cool. We'll just use the microphone then. Ryan, I'm going to come back to you. So, is it working? Hello? Can you hear me?
I'll just speak louder.
Okay. Ryan, so the prevailing argument is that despite contributing less greenhouse gases, Africa is going to be the hardest hit by the effects of climate change. And this has implications for droughts, food security, and things along those lines. So you work within the water space. Now, can you comment on, or sort of take us through how social entrepreneurs can help overcome sort of the repercussions of this menace that's looming on us? It's been described as a catastrophic and apocalyptic, and it's kind of scary. So I want you to paint a picture of how social entrepreneurs can help solve this.
Well, I don't think there's a whole lot we can do to prevent it. So all we can really do is go out and conduct feasibility studies and try to take in all the factors and monitor where's going to get more rain or less rain, probably using less centralized infrastructure, using decentralized infrastructure. If there's no longer water in one area but another, you don't have this big investment sitting there that is no longer playing a meaningful role. So I think it's just adapting to, accepting it, that it's going to probably affect you, and figure out how to manage that and mitigate the risks along the way.
Thank you for that brief answer. Megan, so by the turn of the century, Africa will have over 1 billion young people. I mean, 1 billion young people. Now, when you ground that in the scheme of that many people not having jobs, and we already have, you know, astronomical levels of youth unemployment. Now, how do you see social entrepreneurs, you know, responding to this challenge? And from your work, if you can draw on, you know, nuggets of wisdom that has helped you in that space, that would be wonderful.
So I think there's two prongs to this. One is, I mean, where are the net new jobs being created globally, right? Through new ventures. You know, so that's happened here in the US. You know, corporate jobs are pretty static. It's really when you see job growth in the economy, it's through new jobs. So I think there is a great opportunity there for job creation to come through innovation and through entrepreneurial ventures. But at the same time, you know, think of this as an opportunity. There's so many young entrepreneurs now that have come to me, and this is what they want to tackle. they see the talent gap. You know, they see that there's this mismatch, people coming out of university and they're not ready for a job, or they're coming out of secondary education and they haven't had the resources of a guidance counselor or someone that can help them understand how to get to the next level and what do they need to get into university. So it's actually a huge opportunity and space, I think, for a lot of people who are trying to think about what do they want to, what's the problem they want to try and tackle and the problem they want to solve. So there's so many challenges, but I like to really encourage people to think of them as opportunities and space to drive change and kind of change that mindset, because, you know, intelligence and talent is geographically agnostic, right? Opportunity may not be, preparation might not be, so that might mean some companies have to learn to adjust and help skill up people within the organization. But don't think that people can't be skilled up, right? That it might take some adjustments to a business model if you're an entrepreneur. But there is talent, and it's just how you think about accessing and unlocking that.
So to piggyback on that, Effie, I would like you to comment on women entrepreneurs. You know, there's a school of thought that women face more challenges in entrepreneurship on the African continent. Some of them being cultural, some of them being financial. If you can, in your experience as a woman who's also a social entrepreneur, if you can draw on, sort of comment, or maybe comment on some of the challenges that women face, and how do we actually, as a society, help support women?
So when I talk to the women we train, I tell them, first of all, your goal is to build the best business possible. Let's put gender aside. That is the focus. Gender should never be an excuse, right? Once you put yourself in that mind frame, I feel that you sort of unconsciously lift whatever other issues there are, but of course there are realistic issues such as access to finance, which a lot of women face, and the network, right? And I typically give this example whereby, people going to a fund manager, let's say Jane and John. John is about to go to this fund manager to raise funds, right? He has his network, he's made a few calls, people have briefed him on what this fund manager likes to see and what, they look for. He goes in, he's prepared, he makes his presentation based on this information he's received. Jane, on the other hand, unfortunately, might not have the access to the old boys network to be able to find out what this fund manager needs. She goes in, probably, she has exactly the same information, but because she doesn't have all the information that she would have gained from a network or seeing someone that looks like her across the table, she doesn't get access, right? So to be able to help women access those finance for us, we look at, capacity. We do a lot of capacity building, training. You have to be an expert in your market. And we have to help you put together this network of people that, we would be able to say, okay, reach out to this person. They will be interested in the fund, in the kind of work you're doing. And again, making sure it's market-based. So I do feel that, I think to go back to that question, which is what are the challenges? Operational, expertise, I would also say, and just, unfortunately, gender plays a role.
Megan, what do you think about that response? Any thoughts on?
I agree. Let me start there. It's actually a challenge women here in the U.S. face, too. It's very similar. And so I think what I'm optimistic about is people are recognizing this, and that women can build just as successful companies. Their pitch might not look exactly the same as a man's. Their answers might be, women answer questions often very differently than men. There's a statistic, a man will apply for a job if he thinks he has like 25% of the qualifications, and a woman waits till she thinks she has 80%, which is it's incumbent on us to change. But I think that there's also this growing recognition that it's just because someone looks different than you, there's still a business opportunity, and so they can still be just as successful. So, it's also, I think for men to realize that this is happening is also really important, because, if you're a man that wants to go into investing, realize there's an opportunity there that someone else might not see, too.
Right. Ryan, as a man, I want to.
No, I think there's a lot of partnership opportunities. We briefly spoke before the panel started about partnership opportunities, and I think that's something in social entrepreneurship that's very important as you're going out and growing your business, is forging these relationships with people that are focused on things that are related and together can kind of uproot poverty. So for us, our pilot project in Mozambique is this village where you have to go very far to get water. And so this is like a whole person's job all day long. And we asked them what they would do once if they didn't have to do this anymore. And some of them had no idea, like the thought had never crossed their mind. Because why would they, right? Because this is what she's gonna have to do for the whole family to survive. But once she has that time, this is a perfect opportunity to be engaging with this kind of a partnership where there's training, there's skills, like as they start to have this time, they don't just try to figure it out. They're armed with knowledge. So it's a good opportunity at that point to be then having FA run with it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Ryan, in the for-profit sector, it's very easy to measure success with sales, profits, and things of the sort. Now, how do you do that within the social enterprise sector? And particularly, how does Operation Water do that?
For us, we decided to be a nonprofit to fully align our interests with the people that we're serving. When the poorest people in the world are your clients, every dollar you make is literally from them. So being a nonprofit, we can engage with other nonprofits and companies that may be willing to make donations. For instance, for the distribution of pipes, I'm going to be speaking to Barry, who's he sits on the board of a drip irrigation company. So say, well, for these projects, why not make a donation? Where we wouldn't be able to do that if we weren't a nonprofit, because it would be driving our profits and padding our profits. But since our goal is to make it as affordable as possible and get grant funding, we can approach people like UNICEF for donations for the children that we're going to serve. Again, because it's not padding our profits. So it's created a way that we can be more effective at delivering on our solution than you would if we were a for-profit.
Megan, so the fourth industrial revolution will pretty much manifest itself in digital and technological change. It's going to change the way we relate to each other, the way we work, and things along those lines. Now, there's been a lot of responses to that, and Google most recently just set up an AI lab in Accra, Ghana, IBM with a research lab in Nairobi, Kenya. Now, how do you see some of the challenges and opportunities these present for entrepreneurship, particularly social entrepreneurship on the African continent?
I mean, I think it's, in my mind, almost completely positive. Look, IBM, Google, they recognize the opportunity and the promise of and what is happening in Africa. And there are 1 billion, you kind of presented that as a challenge earlier, but this is where the next consumers are coming from. This is where the next tech entrepreneurs are coming from. And I think IBM, Google, they have the opportunity to touch those consumers and use them as almost like a living lab, right? And work to understand, how will all these youth in Africa interact with, I mean, they already interact, obviously, on a digital stage and mobile capacity in ways people in other parts of the world don't. So I think that it's just another place where, they can drive some innovations forward, and also model for some folks, what opportunities there are. That said, too, I mean, I think you've got some really amazing young entrepreneurs or young engineers who are working in these companies who are getting their feet wet, building their professional career, and they're going to learn what those challenges are and have the opportunity to honestly, I think, spin out some amazing companies, too, and really have that network.
So how about the Africans themselves, like these young people? How can they leverage this new wave of technological change in entrepreneurship?
Oh, I mean, there's so many opportunities because you've leapfrogged with digital technology. You don't have to worry about traditional infrastructure. You don't have to, like, you can leapfrog so many other, like, systemic challenges that are we drive by, you know, if you think creatively about how you can leverage that digital technology. So we have an alum. The company, the brand is called SoCo. It's sold here in the U.S. through Anthropologie, Nordstrom's, and the entrepreneur who founded it, she started out because she just wanted to basically, her first idea was she'd travel to Africa and she'd see this beautiful artisan jewelry and she wanted to do an Etsy for Africa. And pretty quickly she realized, wait a minute, this is not original, this is okay, but it's not gonna scale. A leap forward, what she's actually built is a distributed workforce. So she has 2,500 artisans, her company has 2,500 artisans throughout Kibera in Nairobi. They're in micro factories of 2 and 3 people. And what she's able to do with this distributed manufacturing network is literally, the jewelry is actually designed in San Francisco, designed for distribution to a Nordstrom's, to a Anthropologie. The designs are sent digitally to the headquarters in Kenya. And then she distributes through a mobile app to her groups of artisans what the order is, what the design is. And these are brass, bone, and horn artisans. And they're able to make small batch, very quickly, new designs, instead of shipping something to China where it needs to take 6 months to get the factory up and running, they can do small batch. And then they have networks within Kibera where the quality control is done. Everything's done digitally through the app. She pays the artisans through the app. When they have capacity, they take jobs. When they don't, or when they're doing something else, you know, they are free to work in another capacity. So all of a sudden, she has this technology that allows for small manufacturers to be connected to a global supply chain, a global buyers network. But like I said, she started out thinking, oh, I'm just going to do Etsy. Like, it's just going to be a platform, and I'm going to just showcase these designs. And instead, leveraging technology, really thought more strategically about how the whole system could work best for everyone. And there's all sorts of numbers on, you know, how much more she pays her artisans, or the artisans are paid, and, you know, and production and things like that. But I think there's so much opportunity if people start to think creatively about ways to leverage digital technology.
Thank you. So this January, I was actually in China, and I was completely befuddled by the sheer size of that country and the number of people you have over there. And so when I compare that to the African continent and how many people we actually have, if we could have one market that allows us to trade amongst ourselves, that would be phenomenal for, you know, to be able to sell our products. So in regards to that, Effie, I'm going to ask you, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which was actually signed by a number of head of states, there is a belief that if all 55 countries actually joined, we would have a 4 trillion combined consumer spending, consumer market. Now, when you think about that, in terms of that being able to help us elevate African entrepreneurs and to be able to help them like sell their products, that is just phenomenal. Now, what are your thoughts on that, and how can you know, entrepreneurs in Africa tap into this new opportunity?
I think that that would be a great opportunity from different angles. The first one being from getting access to funding, right? I think about that. As an entrepreneur, you're going out to investors trying to seek funding, and when they ask you, you know, one of the big questions is, what is your market, right? Most of the time, you'll say, okay, you know, it's Kenya, you know, and you pull out the map and you show them the different spots on the map in Kenya or in Nigeria, or you're like, you know what, I'm actually doing amazing because this product, I'm actually going to be able to sell it in Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana. And it ends there, right? So when you think about the effects of this, you are bringing up to 54, 55 fragmented markets into one market, right? Because the essence of this, of the CFTA, is that they are going to be removing at least 90% of the import barriers and giving these entrepreneurs access to the different markets. So at this point, an entrepreneur whose market was won, if they now go back to the table, re-strategize, and critically think about their product, without those barriers, they can actually access different markets. and have all those customers. And what does that mean from investor point of view? You're now able to tell an investor, hey, you know, with 3 markets, I was able to do maybe 2x, but now if I leverage economies of scale, if I move production from maybe Nigeria to Ethiopia, because maybe Ethiopia specializes in X, I'm utilizing that, and as well, giving you a bigger market, and guess what? I'm giving you the X's you want, the 3X, the 4X that you're looking for, right? So that's the way I think about it from the funding perspective. Obviously, I think there have been numbers put out there that within 3 years, you know, by 2020 or 2021, if this is implemented, we could potentially unlock 35 billion into the African economy, which would be great. So I think it's a great move. Of course, we have countries that are still, you know, dilly-dallying on signing because they're the bigger economies, and I'm sure they also want to protect their entrepreneurs as well. But I think that countries also need to think critically about, you know, benefiting from economies of scale and how we can all specialize in different things and be able to really have a market that works for us.
So that's an interesting response, but it sounds all well and good.
Yeah.
But when you think deeply about Africa, the cultural differences,
Correct.
the language differences, how do you navigate that to make it work?
Cultural difference it's a big player, right? I think it's possible to navigate that. I mean, for one, let's look at ECOWAS, right? Which was one of the trading blocks, right? The English-speaking African countries coming together, and I think I don't know. I don't remember if we have some French in there, but they were able to sort of leverage, you know, their different skill sets to be able to help open up the market, right? So we have Nigeria in there, we have Ghana in there, there are cultural differences there. So I think that, you know, most importantly, when I think about this, I actually think about the individual countries, trying to make sure that their policies align. That's a big one, because you could sign up for everything, but if your local policies, for me it's more of a policy level, if your local policy conflicts, that it makes it impossible to really implement the free, that's where you're gonna choke, and that's when everything falls apart.
So speaking about policy, let me revert to Ryan. Ryan, how do you think governments, in this sense, can use policy, lawmaking, regulations to spur innovation on the African continent? And in your work, have you kind of come across difficulties and challenges? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, we go in realizing that a lot of the places we're going to work, we may have to work to get some of the laws changed in order for it to be more conducive to private investment. So in Mozambique, where we're working, I just met actually last week with people from Speed Plus, which is a USAID funded initiative that's, they've already made a lot of progress on changing the law and to become more investor friendly. So that was a very encouraging sign, knowing that we're not gonna have to go in there and do it from scratch. Like, there's other groups that realize a lot needs to change. I think as nonprofit driven to just serve the people, that it's going to take what it's going to take. So if that's the next step, then we all of a sudden have to be speaking with some lawyers and building relationships with the people and earning their trust and saying we're too exposed here. There's no way investors going to come in if this is there. So, and then working to kind of it takes longer, but it's worthwhile, because then it's an environment for everybody else to be able to better participate.
Wonderful, wonderful. Megan, you've been in the talent space for a
Can I
bit.
just chime in on the government piece?
Yeah,
Do you mind?
yeah.
Because there's something, so we do, a lot of our students and our fellows that we work with are from Africa, a lot are from Latin America too. And I would caution against expecting a government solution to really be the ultimate end goal. Particularly in Latin America, you've seen some governments that have really gone in and driven for innovation, and they've put in government funds, and they've put in special programs, and it spurs some innovation, but it doesn't entirely change the mindset of the people. People are still risk averse to, you know, investment, and they still don't want to fail, and so, you know, they kind of spur some innovation, but it doesn't take it the whole way that it really support like a full ecosystem change. So I would just caution against expecting a government-driven policy or, I mean, governments to me are part of the responsible parties, but you have to think about kind of the whole ecosystem. We have a framework actually at MIT called, it's a program, Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, and what it relies on is like different levers operating together to really spur entrepreneurship innovation, and that's government being one, corporates being two, universities, the entrepreneurs themselves, and the risk capital or the venture capital. If they actually, if you want to spur innovation in an ecosystem, those levers have to be coordinating somehow. If that's really if you really want to drive something forward. So I just have seen in Latin America a lot of governments that have, and in the Middle East that have tried to, like, from the top down say, you will innovate. You know, and it's just, there's a lot of other factors and conditions. It's helpful if they put policies in place that are innovator friendly, but there are other elements that need to be a part of that for it to really work.
Right. So, correct me if I'm wrong. I hear you mentioned universities.
Yeah.
The belief within the literature on the African continent is that there's a sort of mismatch between the educational system and what the market actually needs. And that sort of cascades also to whether people are getting innovation and entrepreneurship education on the African continent. How do you see education playing a role in talent development?
I think, and honestly, this is based, quite frankly, from a lot of the African students that I work with that I know are working on talent development, and they see this gap, and that there does need to be, whether it is private solutions, whether it entrepreneurial solutions that are, you know, taking responsibility for this kind of gap through different, you know, ventures that entrepreneurs create, or I would encourage, if universities really do care about change, again, involving other actors in that conversation. A university environment, I mean, I know it here, doesn't know exactly what the market needs if it doesn't talk to the market. So working with entrepreneurs and innovators, or working with corporates to change the, you know, so either the universities can be committed to changing their curriculum, driving, you know, for what the market needs, whether that is on the corporate side or on the innovator side, or you have private solutions that come in and start to solve the problem.
Wonderful. And Ryan, I know you were with the African Leadership Academy.
Yes.
Now, can you draw your experience over there? How do you see that sort of feeding into this talent problem?
Into the talent problem?
Like how do you see, like from your experience, like African Leadership Academy, how are they approaching, what's the fundamental goal, and how's it helping sort of overcome the predominant, you know, a disconnect between the education system and the job market, or even entrepreneurship skill acquisition?
Well, I'd say it's a lot of what you've been saying now in terms of cross-cultural cooperation. You know, they take students from across Africa to a boarding school for 2 years, and they learn about one another's differences and celebrate diversity. And then have a spirit of which they want to transform Africa. So while they may access the higher education institutions in the US and Europe, they still remain very focused on Africa. And as soon as they can, come back to Africa to find meaningful work opportunities, which African Leadership Academy has also set up a whole career network, Africa Career Network, where they don't want to leave it to the universities to find them the most exciting jobs in Africa. So they've established a whole new breathing entity that lives within ALA that accesses jobs for alumni, and plugging them in and playing facilitator to provide that network and that social infrastructure.
Wonderful. F.A., what are some of the similarities and dissimilarities you see between African innovation and entrepreneurship and the Western world? And what are your thoughts on, do we need to divorce ourselves from the dominant Western model and create our own models? Could you share your thoughts on that?
That was a loaded question there. So I'll talk about, I think I'll split that into two. I'll talk about innovation first, and then entrepreneurship. In Africa, necessity is the mother of innovation, right? And I say that because when you look at innovation in Africa, it's really resulting, or it comes together as a response to a problem that we have that necessarily wouldn't have been able to be solved here. Let's take M-Pesa. I'm sure almost everyone here in the room knows about M-Pesa, right? Let's use that as an example. M-Pesa started in Kenya, I believe, or one of the first countries to implement that. Prior to it coming into Kenya, Kenyans in the rural area were looking for ways to send money home, you know, to other parts of Kenya. So, you know, what, you know, most of them did, and elsewhere in Africa would be, you know, someone who's traveling, you get them an envelope, they take it over, right? But you have to trust the person so they don't disappear. You know, this was a predominant problem. Another predominant problem then in Kenya was people in the rural area didn't trust the banks to be able to go open up bank accounts. And sometimes the requirements to open up bank accounts itself was so exhausting that it even made no sense to even start, right? M-Pesa was a response to these two problems. Everybody, or almost everyone, I wouldn't say everyone, you know, Africa has the most phones these days now, has at least a flash phone, right? Why can't we figure out a way? I think that was what M-Pesa did, just figured out a way to use flash phones. You have a mobile number to be able to transfer money to different rural areas. And M-Pesa works in an amazing way, right? Like I went to the market in Kenya to go buy some Masai Mara cloth, right? And right there, I have a friend who's helping me bargain, and she finished bargaining, and immediately she's able to transfer money to the market woman right there instantaneously. That is the power of necessity. That is really what it goes back to. That necessity is the mother of innovation in Africa, right? And another example I would briefly talk about also in Nigeria, recyclers, right? It's a lady, she came up with this company that, you know, her goal was to help clean up, you know, the states, recycling. We have lots of plastic litters elsewhere, I mean, all around the states, causing lots of environmental problems. She decided, I'll go around, get a group of people to pick it up. I think she's a Wharton grad, actually.
I think she was one of our fellows.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
MIT.
Yes,
MIT.
yeah, okay. Okay, MIT, okay. Yeah, so I'm sorry about that. So she she started, you know, going around to help, you know, put together people, set up this company to help clean up Lagos. I think she started with Lagos. And to be able to access those in the rural area, she figured, you know, how do I know when, you know, the dustbin is full and we need to come pick it up? You know, let's use SMS phones, right? Again, those flash phones, using SMS, texting to say, you know, it's ready, come pick up, or if individuals in their household wanted, because she wanted to make it easy, telling people to get on transportation, public transportation, to come deposit plastic somewhere. Yeah, it's not gonna work. So she comes to the communities. Once she gets those text messages, she comes in there, picks it up, and it's done, and she gives them incentives like, you know, a sachet of detergent or something. But that is what we're talking about, innovation in Africa. So I believe that, you know, the best examples that I've seen in Africa, it's really where it's homegrown. And I'm unapologetic about that. I feel like importing doesn't always work for us because we have to, you know, in most countries we don't have 24-hour power supply. We have to take all these things into consideration to build a solution that works for us. So that's from the innovation angle, right? Entrepreneurship. One of the largest incubators or VC-style model is actually in Africa for entrepreneurship. I know people are gonna be like, what of Silicon Valley? I would use the example of the Igbo method of entrepreneurship. Do we have Nigerians in the house? The Igbo method of entrepreneurship, I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about, right? Let's think about that, right? Now I'm going to explain to those that don't know it. The Igbo method of entrepreneurship is where, you know, someone, you know, you doesn't necessarily didn't maybe have access to going to school. You come out, you're 16, you need a job, but guess what? You don't have the funding, and you can't go to mommy or daddy to get, you know, maybe the best they can give you is a farmland, right? You go to someone, a very successful person in your community that has, you know, he's a trader. He exports and imports electronics, and he's been doing this for over 20 years. You say, look, all I want to do is learn this business from you. I'll be loyal to you. I just want to learn. You train him for 5 years. You provide him with his basic needs. And at the end of the 5 years, you know what he does? He opens up a shop for you in the same market. Stocks it for you. You're not paying a dime. And he said, you work for me? Go and start your business. And through this, thousands and thousands and thousands of Africans have been able to trade and get the startup capital they need. So if there's not an incubation model that has, I feel like, in terms of the volume, I think one of the examples is Alaba Market, that on a yearly basis have at about $4 billion turnover every year. If that is not the largest incubator model that exists, please come talk to me. I would like to find out where the other one is.
So Ryan, so you basically, the bulk of your work prior to Operation Water was, in ALA was here, you went to school here, you grew up here. Now, can you comment on the degree to which you're married to or divorced from some of the innovation approaches, entrepreneurship approaches in the US might have influenced your work when you were in Africa? How did you learn to let go of or reclaim new ways of doing things while you were there?
Trial by fire. Just there's going to be a lot of things you have to figure out along the way. So as long as you're committed to doing it, you just kind of engage with the people who can help you in different ways. Like I said, through partnerships, but also within your organization. Like we just built a technical advisory board, which wasn't originally in our plans, but it became a need that we saw that we needed to meet internally. So built a team for that, and just carry on, keep on onward and upward, and solve the problems all along the way. Because there's always just going to be more and more and more. So the biggest skill is really just to be able to solve problems. And in Africa, as you mentioned, they're always having to deal with some constraint that Western world companies aren't having to deal with, like a lack of power or infrastructure, a road or something. There's all these, something's always going wrong. You're always having to make a plan and figure it out. So I think Africans are actually almost best suited to be entrepreneurs than just about anyone, because they're all figuring stuff out all day long.
Figuring things out all day long. On that note, Megan, if all of you can take this question, who is the Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, or Bill Gates of social entrepreneurs? And what can we learn from those people? If all of you can answer that question.
I think we're about to meet him or her. I really do. I think that's what we're really seeing is a moment in time where that big entrepreneurial figure from Africa who everyone's going to want to be, and people think an entrepreneur looks like Mark Zuckerberg with the hoodie, or Bezos with the big bald head, and but no, I think like the face of what entrepreneurship means is really at the cusp of changing, and it could be someone in this room, someone at this school. It could have been the young man who was on stage yesterday talking about his technology to detect with a phone tuberculosis and pneumonia, and he's not that old. So anyway, I think there's some amazing role models that have kind of come before, but I really feel like we're on the cusp of this generational wave of really amazing entrepreneurs who are going to be the global icons.
Okay, very, very briefly, what would you say now?
I think I've met them. And I say that because I think that on the African continent, there are a lot of unsung heroes. There are a lot of people driving change. For example, this example I talked about with this, philanthropic kind of style of training the apprenticeships, the apprentices, and then opening up stores for them. Those guys aren't getting front page media coverage. They're there. So I think, we have met them.
Fred Swaniker, who's the founding CEO of the African Leadership Academy, he was actually inspired to launch ALA more than anything to create the Bill Gates and so on so of Africa. And the students who have gone through there so far are amazing. I was just looking around to see if anyone in this room, but I don't see. Oh, okay. And you know, I think I think you're right. They're already out there, but I think there is going to be more, and I think it's coming more and more and more. So it's exciting times.
Thank you very much. At this juncture, we're going to take questions from our phenomenal audience who've actually had the patience to listen to us for 2 months. Now let's have questions from
Now
the
don't be too tough.
All right, questions. Okay, let's start with this dude.
This dude is Eden. I'm an MBA in Boston University, and I have a question about the comfort zone, because growing up in Ghana till I left just last year, I've mingled with a lot of people, and I see that a lot of people are in the comfort zone. Like, there are rich people who are not using their wealth to make an impact, and there are some, privileged young people who think they already have all the need, so they are not trying to do something. So what is the way forward to get people out of their comfort zone to get on board innovation growth?
Who's the question for?
Oh, okay. So I think what I understand is that you're saying there are lots of people there that have access but are not necessarily using it to help. I think that there are some people you really can't change in that regard, like if they don't want to do it, but those, I think that, again, it's the environment. It goes back to that policy part, right? If most African governments are able to at least structure like their income tax portion of their income tax or their tax policy such that it encourages giving, you get a tax break if you do. And I know, like, for example, Nigeria has been cracking down on non-taxpayers. So the government has been doing an amazing job in actually getting income tax. So I think that, when you try to hit someone in the pocket, you get the best response. So I think that could be a way to encourage, and of course through education as well.
All right. This way, the Harvard. So when you're asking questions, you just tell us your name, what school you attend, your question, very crisp and short, and who your questions are directed to.
Thank you. My name is Oye. I'm not a student,
Okay.
but I'm from Lagos, Nigeria.
Great.
And my question is for Ife Ukalo.
Okay.
This is what I do. I sell Gary.
All right. Let's stop before you.
My question is, obviously, we all know what this means.
Yes.
Cassava. I mean, it's
Yes.
from cassava. But, currently in the world, we're trying as much as possible. When you mentioned something about homegrown products, we're trying as much as possible to get our own products to acceptable both in Nigeria, in Africa, and the world at large. So my question is this: what would you advise for vertical integration? Because I know that the journey for being just not an entrepreneur, also a business owner, you just don't want the products in Nigeria only.
Correct.
You have to bridge the gap and go across the border. So what would you advise for vertical
No.
integration?
Great question. A lot of our trainees have gone through that, and I would also say we've actually helped some of our trainees to get their products from the African continent here. And what you have to do, first of all, is the quality of the product, right? Your standards should no longer be the local standards. You have to look at what the regulations require here, and also trying to target your market. So also what we do at Impact Her is we also help incorporate we turn non-tech-based businesses into tech-supported businesses because that helps to access a larger market. So we can talk after this in detail.
Okay. Is there any question?
My name is Aaron Pierre. I'm originally from Haiti, but I'm living in Kentucky, going to the University of Kentucky right now. I have a question for Megan. As of now, I have seen a lot of initiative in the continent of Africa, whether it's Africa 50, the AU. Now, what are some similarities, when it comes to the common goals that the continent itself has been pushing toward lately, comparing to the Latin America, we have CARICOM, but there's such cultural nuances in the diverse countries that are affiliated with the U.S., Spanish, France, where we don't really have that much of common goals to work towards sustainable development. So what are some similarities you think that young leaders in the Caribbean or Latin America could adopt or could look through?
I mean, actually, Latin America is a conglomeration of small economies itself, and a lot of Brazilians, which is the biggest economy, don't consider themselves Latin Americans, they consider themselves Brazilians. So there is actually this kind of, there's a Latin America conference at MIT, there's a Brazil conference, it's what they do. But I think one model to look at is how companies that have started, say, in Chile or in Argentina have thought about expansion to other markets across Latin America, right? There's different, but each of them still are starting, quite honestly, in smaller markets where they realize they have to think about how do I get to my next market if I'm gonna really grow and scale. But that's largely done at the entrepreneur level, not so much at a kind of pan Latin America level. So I think maybe looking at some of the models of how some of these companies, particularly coming out of Chile, are thinking about, okay, I can start here, but now how do I get to Mexico? How do I get to Colombia? How do I get to other customers so that I can really build a bigger market and open up more opportunities?
Thank you for that. Can we get your question?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Hawa. I'm a student at Smith College, and I'm originally from Sierra Leone, West Africa. And my question actually goes to you, Ife, but anyone on the floor can answer it as well or give their input. And it's in regard to the African Free Trade Agreement that you spoke about and that Ife was also talking about. The idea of Africans, because now we've seen, like, for the past almost for a decade now, we've seen how our markets have been kind of polluted, by like foreign goods, and how that is kind of kicking our young entrepreneurs out of the market. So my question is, like, how can you prevent, like, larger economy in Africa from, like, dominating, or, like, how do I even put this, like, from kind of outwaging, or, like, exactly, like, kind of, like, just take it. No, it's not even destroying. Like, just dominating is actually the word, like, I just don't want to use domination. But yeah, like, kind of, like, how do we prevent larger economies from, like, dominating, like, the smaller economy? Like Sierra Leone, for instance, right? Like, how do we prevent Nigeria, which is, like, this gigantic economy? Yeah, like, how do we do that, and how do we prevent Western influence? Because we know that all African states, yeah, African states were kind of colonized, but, like, this former colonies are still kind of involved in Africa, and we have foreign players that are involved in Africa. How can we also prevent them from interfering in our internal trade?
Okay, no. Okay, I get that. I think so. You're focused on the smaller economies, right?
Yes.
Okay, how do they survive? I think this is where creativity comes into play. I would think about, each economy, the small and medium-sized business owners and those have to really think about how do they leverage economies of scale, right? What is your talent? Like, if, the community has natural resource to maybe making cocoa, right? And you're able to make sure that you have the capacity, you're building capacity, you're building the talent, you make sure that you're leveraging economies of scale such that, regardless of what's going on, you're still the preferred source, right? Like, with a lot of things we want to produce these days, or manufacture, mass produce boxes, we think China, right? So why not utilize whatever your skill set is, get the required training for that, so that whenever people think X, they think your country. And I think that that's a way that we can, and you can't really, besides, policy, which we talk about all day, but, Megan mentioned that it's not the end or be all, which I agree with, besides that, and trying to, de-incentivize, external corporations to come in, I think that the real answer lies within the community themselves, and we need to really go back to the drawing board to think about how we can leverage our skill sets.
Thank you for that. So we can take 2 more questions, and then we'll round up the panel, and you can have, like, one-on-one sessions with the panelists afterwards. So we'll take a question from the back. Please, your question, your name, where you're from, who your question is directed to.
Before you do that, please refrain from giving speeches.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Naomi Kamiza. I'm from Kenya and a student at Michigan State University. My question is on microcredit as a driver for women empowerment and growth. So it has been effective so far, but how do we scale from just doing microcredit and small businesses for African women and move to the next level of building bigger businesses and being key movers in the business world in Africa?
Right? Yeah. Microcredits, as you said, work well, and they've been working well. To be able to access more finance, that's where we talk about the VCs, right? We talk about PEs, we talk about other institutional investors. But please, entrepreneurs in this room, do not forget the free money. It's out there. Because most people tend to forget that because they say, oh, we're not non-profit. You don't have to be non-profit to access that. So there are a range of funding possibilities, but it also depends on your appetite, right? If you're going for the PE, you have to, or VC fund, you have to remember, especially with PE, you have to remember that you're locked in for 5 years at the minimum, right? At the minimum, and there has to be an exit. So you have to think critically as to what are your needs, what is your appetite, and be able to use that to match where your funding, where you want your funding to come from.
All right, so one more question. Oh, this is hard. Okay, that Sorry.
Oli from Tufts University, Mechanical Engineering and Entrepreneurial Leadership. I'm happy to meet you, Mr. Ryan. So my question follows up with what she was asking. I know you've spoken to the ways we can address our competitors, right? Capitalistic competitors as a startup. But my question is, what are the specific challenges that we need to know, that we need to be aware of when we are like founders of startup companies, when we go into such a big market, you know? We might have some answers to them, but we don't know which challenges are specific and most important ones, you know? So having been in that experience, what are the challenges that we need to be aware of while going against big competitors, capitalistic organizations?
Who is this question directed to?
Ryan.
Okay, Ryan.
Ryan.
I'm pretty sure it was anybody. I think you gotta focus on the things that you're good at. You have to spend a lot of time and energy first getting to know yourself and understanding what you're good at, what you're not, and then try to understand the market and what it appreciates that you're good at. And when the market appreciates those things that you're good at, and if you like to do them, at that point, then I think you just carry on with, and the passion will ultimately drive you if you've been true to yourself the whole time and are sure that you're just not kind of selling your own, buying your own dream that you don't believe in. That'll just sustain you through everything that you're gonna have to face, which, every single life is different. Every entrepreneurial experience is gonna be a bit different. Yes, there's some commonalities, but I think you gotta ask a lot of the hard questions early and get a lot of that stuff right early. And then just be willing to, as I mentioned before, figure everything out along the way.
So can so you just got a copy of the book, right?
Yes.
And so I should think about what, in the book they talk about these market creating innovations. Think about where you can drive a change that a product doesn't exist. There actually isn't a competitor, these large commercial entities that you're worried about, right? There's non-consumption. Fall in love with a problem, right? Identify what you think your solution is, and then you start going forward. What's the most awesome thing about the challenge in front of you is that likely you're gonna find there's a whole system you have to impact, but no one's done it before. Like these big multinational, the competitors don't exist, you're creating your own environment. So really think about okay, here's the problem. And yeah, I'm gonna all of a sudden, and we've seen this with a lot of our entrepreneurs, they go in and I've got a solution, this is the problem I'm gonna solve, right? we had students that built waterless toilets, pay-per-use waterless toilets again for Kibera in Nairobi. All of a sudden they were like, wait a second, this isn't sustainable as a nonprofit, but we can impact the entire waste value chain. And now they are producing fertilizer and chicken feed and capturing biogas off the waste that they've collected from these toilets and selling it at such a profit and such demand that, wait a minute, they can't even supply it with their toilets, so they're going to other. But they went in saying, hey, I've got this cool toilet, and I'm gonna solve the global sanitation crisis with this cool toilet. But when they got in there, it was like suddenly like, oh, wait a minute, it's actually my solution. There's a single problem, the solution's multifaceted. But that's what's really interesting and cool and different, but there's not a big conglomerate doing that. So I think about change your mindset. I would encourage you to change your mindset a little bit and look for those opportunities that a solution doesn't exist yet.
Okay. On that note, let's be on our feet.
And we'd just like to hand out a few of these books to our panelists. So thank you very much, Ryan. I know you have one.
That's okay. I'll take it to the center. Don't worry. I'm all right.
Yeah. So we can just take a question.
Ryan, I just want to say I appreciated your answer because that was a question I had. I just didn't want to ask, but that was a good answer. Sorry. Yeah.